Hello everybody, this is Mint Lightning, and today I would like to share with you some things I have learned about using the Elytra, like rocket efficiency and stuff. Just share some tips and tricks I've learned. This is not going to be a super in-depth look at Elytra mechanics and stuff like that, but I think you'll find it useful for general Minecraft playing. The first thing I want to talk about is height. What's the highest we can get into the air with one rocket, and that is based on your vertical view angle. So you can see in the F3 menu on the left, in the part where it says facing, it has two numbers on the far right. One is my horizontal angle, one is my vertical angle, and it's the second number that we're looking at here. So if it's positive, that means we're looking below the horizon, and if it's negative, that means we're looking above the horizon. It doesn't really make a lot of sense that negative would be up, but that's how it is. There's some computer science reasons for that, but whatever. So through some testing, I came up with this chart. This basically shows our takeoff angle down here. This is straight up, and this is almost straight horizontal, right? -5 is just 5 degrees above the horizon. And you can see that if we're looking straight up, we get, about 39 blocks up. But you can see the graph peaks here at 35 degrees above the horizon at around 77 blocks up. So if you want to get the most vertical height from one rocket, you want to aim -35 degrees above the horizon. The next thing we want to consider is horizontal distance. And just like height, it is based on our vertical angle. So this is about a purely horizontal flight. How far can you get with no rockets, but just by jumping and flying? So this chart here is showing our vertical angle versus our horizontal flight distance, and this is starting from 100 blocks up. So if you pillared up 100 blocks and then picked a vertical angle and then jump off and flew, this is how far you would get for each of these values. This line is the transition between looking above the horizon and looking below the horizon, or I should say parallel to the horizon. And right here is the peak. So if you're looking directly parallel to the horizon line, that's going to get you the furthest flight distance horizontally. And then this last graph here is kind of a mix of the first two, vertical angle again down here and the horizontal flight distance. But this is from a ground takeoff with one rocket. So with our previous graphs, we saw that -35 was the best angle for getting the most vertical height, and that 0 was the best angle for getting the most horizontal distance. And because a ground takeoff is a mix of both how high you get with the rocket and how far you fly, that's why the chart looks like it does here. You can see that I did a scatter plot here, and that's because the data is not super consistent, because it really depends on when you activate your wings after you jump. So if you like spam the space bar versus jumping and then hitting space right before you hit the ground and then taking off, like that has a big impact on how far you go. I say big, but like you can see the distances between these is not really that much. But in general, you can see how this trend goes. This kind of thing is useful to know if you are filling out a really big map. If you pick one of these angles and you just keep your camera at that angle and fire rockets, that this is going to be the general shape of the yield you get for how many rockets you use, right? So it's showing that around -17 degrees is your best bet if you don't want to have to move the mouse around. And that's purely based on rocket efficiency, right? How far you want to get per rocket. But if you want to go faster, you're going to want to pick some number between -17 and 0. And the further you go this way, the less efficient your rocket use is going to be, but the faster you're probably going to go. So now that we've gone over all the statistics, let's take a look at what it actually looks like in Minecraft. So I have this big graph set up here. The grid lines are 10 blocks apart. You can see the black lines on the left and bottom of the screen. That's the X and Y axis. So this first one is just showing the flight path of a totally vertical takeoff. You can see for this one we got lucky, we got 41 blocks-ish. This next one is a negative 35 degree takeoff. We get to about 75-ish blocks. And then I just kept the camera at negative 35 and we just trail off. This one is also negative 35 degrees. We got a little bit luckier on our timing. We got to 78 blocks up. And then at the very peak, I switched to 0 degrees, so parallel with the horizon line. And then this last flight path is the negative 17 degrees. And you can see we don't go quite as high, but the slope of the second half of our curve here is much less steep than the 35 degree one, but more steep than the 0 degree one. So if we look at all four together, the cyan is the straight up and down, red is the negative 17 degrees, orange is negative 35 and then not moving the camera, and the magenta one is negative 35 degrees and then switching to 0 degrees at the peak. So if you want to go the greatest possible distance with one rocket, you're going to want to follow the magenta path here, which is taking off at negative 35 degrees, and then when you get to the very top, tilting the camera back down to be 0 degrees parallel with the horizon. And if you're doing a lot of flying around, for example filling out a map, keeping the camera at negative 17 and then occasionally using a rocket just to keep you up in the air is going to be the most efficient use of rockets, if you don't want to move the camera, I mean. The last thing I want to mention is how you should be spacing out your rocket usage. And you have two options here. You can either use the rocket and then look at your Y coordinate, and as soon as you get to the peak and start dropping again, use the next one. And then wait, get to the peak, use the next one, and then you just wait. As I mentioned before, the statistics show that negative 17 is your best bet for rocket efficiency if you don't want to move the camera. However, it's a lot slower than using, so if you're concerned about efficiency and time, you just have to find a balance that's somewhere between 0 and negative 17. And using that method, we've gone 1,056.5 blocks. The alternative is to space out your rocket usage such that you pick some Y value, say 70, and after you take off the first time, you wait until your Y level drops below 70 and then use your next rocket. So we're getting closer, 70, we drop below, so we'll use the next one. And by spacing them out, it looks like we've gone 1,032 blocks, so not that much different. It's a little bit less, but that might have been due to my initial takeoff. Also, I guess there is a third option. If you make a firework rocket with a longer duration, so this is a flight duration 3, which I think means that it will activate for 3 seconds, so it should just be equivalent to 3 rockets. And you can see we've gone almost exactly 500 blocks, so less than half the distance with a duration 3 firework rocket. And that's because a lot of our vertical height we're gaining from lift and not actually propulsion. So you can see at the beginning of each one of our lines here, we have a pretty straight line, a pretty even slope, and then right about here, they start to curve upward. And that's because this straight line is when the rocket's actually active, and it's propelling us in a linear fashion. And then after the propulsion ends, we're getting a whole bunch of lift, and that's aviation. I'm not going to talk about the physics of aviation, but yeah, the general reason that a duration 3 fireworks rocket is not the same as a duration 1 fireworks rocket is because it's just doing 3 times as much of this and then 1 of this. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. The only situation where it would be the same is if you were going straight up, right? Because you're not getting any lift here at all. It's just propulsion. So that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you found this video useful, please give it a like so that more people can see it and learn things, I guess. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!